Hey, everybody. It is Thursday. It's kind of weird to say that. So it's Thursday. It's the 16th of February. Well, it's an AMA. So I'm back on duty. Oliver, now officially a dad for the second time. I thought he was last time, but I jumped the gun. But now he is. So, dealing with two kids now. So I think we're missing another product spotlight, but we're going to get there probably next week, hopefully. So let's go. There's a lot of questions already, so I'm just going to jump right into it. And let's start at the first one. That usually makes sense. From London. London asking, hi, Kevin. I have a few questions regarding the Ignium takeover. All right. That's not actually a question, but here we go. Question number one. Do you have an approximate timeline when Ignium services, secondary market, NFTs, et cetera, will be fully integrated into Coinmetro's platform? Will these services be tied into XCM's fee structure? So an approximate timeline currently? No. The idea right now is that what we want to move first, or where we want to move first, is to make sure that Coinmetro's own equity is tradable. So that would be that secondary market specifically for Coinmetro's own equity. That's the priority number one. Still don't have an approximate timeline yet, but that's the first thing that we want to get accomplished. Other services will be integrated over time, but again, not necessarily a priority, and that's why we don't really have a timeline as of yet. Plus, we just finished. Actually, we haven't finished yet, but we've come very close to finishing. Let's call it the admin side of this deal. And once that's complete, we can start focusing and setting dates and timelines for what would be, integration and actually getting the services onto our platform. As far as will they be tied into XCM fee structure, the goal is always to get every service tied into XCM and into those tiers. That is always the goal. Now, is every one of our products tied into that tier system? No. Is our goal to get all our products tied into that tier system? Absolutely. So that's the goal. That's going to be the goal with any service we offer, and that's going to include these as well. Number two, does the takeover Ignium mean that Coinmetro's invest platform for bonds equity will return? Well, that's going to still require licensing. Well, at least in the way that we did it previously, right? So we ran what you would commonly call a primary market for crowdfunding at a time when there wasn't a license required to run that type of platform. Now, what Ignium has received in the past a no action letter, basically, or an exemption letter from the FSA in Estonia. That's the regulator that regulates, almost every financial service in the country, saying that essentially, the crux of it is that since Ignium does not bring the investor, so it's simply a platform where you bring your own investor. So you bring the offer, you bring your investor, and we just give you this, or Ignium just gives you this platform by which those two things can connect. It wasn't crowdfunding, didn't fall under that umbrella. Now, that exemption is still in place. Once MiCA comes out, and potentially either before or after MiCA comes out, there may be changes which mean that exemption is no longer fit, and new licensing would be required to offer that primary piece, even how Ignium does it, and potentially, maybe even on the billboard side, though I think that's less likely in the short term. So I guess the short answer to that is, in the short term, no, at least not how we did it previously. Potentially the way that Ignium was running its own platform, that has more potential, at least in the short term, until additional licensing would be required. Will Ramo stay on board as a co-founder of Ignium? Number three, no. So Ramo has sold his shares to Coinmetro Group, parent company of Coinmetro. So he's no longer a shareholder of Ignium, and as a result as well, no longer on the board of Ignium. What is the total cash expense Coinmetro had to pay for the acquisition? If my maths are correct, it should be around $200K. I don't have all the numbers sitting in front of me. It's higher than $200K, but it's in that, the hundreds of Ks area. And that also, and on top of that, there is some Coinmetro equity, obviously, that was swapped. But in terms of cash, it is higher than $200K, but it's still in the hundreds of Ks. How much is the takeover adding to Coinmetro's monthly burn rate? Roughly 10, 11, 12,000 euro. It may add slightly less or slightly more in the next 3 to 4 months. And most of that burn rate comes from people. And those people are currently still working with us to make sure that transition works smoothly and that we're able to, finish this admin process and start to integrate. But it doesn't add significantly to our burn rate. Number 6, wow, London, you're really knocking them out here. Ignium used to be valued at 20 million. What steps do you think are necessary for it to return to that valuation? Well, I think it's just about growth. It's about, well, one, valued at 200 million, obviously in a different market. I still think there's major value in Ignium, and that's why I pushed to make sure that we could move forward with this acquisition. I think it's important for Coinmetro, and I think it adds value that, honestly, thinking about any other exchange, they simply don't have. I don't know of another exchange that has this type of product offering. And to build it again would have been more costly and taken more time. So for me, I think it still adds that amount of value to our valuation. And I think we can justify that valuation based on the kind of projected value and the amount of revenue that this could potentially add to Coinmetro, even just with that secondary billboard market, without taking into account other pieces of the ecosystem. But for that valuation really to skyrocket, it's going to be about growth. It's going to be about, well, revenue, really. Now it's not so much about the growth of Ignium as a brand, but it's the growth of the revenue that's tied to those products that are offered through, under the Ignium brand through Coinmetro. And then eventually probably into the Coinmetro brand. Number 7, you mentioned that Ignium is operating on a regulatory exemption instead of a license. Is there any risk this exemption could be revoked? There's always risk. I think we'll know a bit more once we see the final drafts or the final kind of what MiCA is going to look like. But in the short term, no. And I think the billboard is relatively safe. And if anything were to happen, we're probably talking a few years or a couple of years before that happens. But you don't know. Something could happen tomorrow. I mean, but that's the risk with any exemption. I don't necessarily see that on the table currently. Thank you for your answers. You are very welcome. Thanks for all the questions. Amazing. Katie Miner, good morning, Kevin. Thanks again for the AMA. How do you think the SEC going after staking will affect Coinmetro? What are your thoughts on the SEC going after stable coins? That's confusing as hell. I think it makes it more confusing, the regulator that's doing it. The SEC, everybody knows, stands for the Securities Exchange Commission, right? It's got that big word securities, right? Right smack dab in the front of the name. And that would probably make you assume that they're saying that the assets are securities. And I'm not really sure that's exactly what they're saying. I think the idea here is, at least how I understand it, in that not every staking program or every staking product would fall under what the SEC is claiming is essentially, it should be a regulated product. Not necessarily security, but a regulated product. If you pool assets from any type of asset, right, and then you take those assets and you do something with them, which inherently creates risk, you don't and you aren't showing that risk to the end user, and there's risk that they may lose all their funds, and that risk falls entirely on the platform that's offering the product. Let's see. I'm back. I don't know how long that bad connection lasted, so I'll start again here. But so I think it's confusing because it's the SEC. They're saying that some of the ways that these products were offered means they should be regulated. And if you're pooling assets and taking those assets, doing something with them, and the risk that appears from you doing that entirely falls on you as the platform operator, yeah, that may be a regulated product. Now, if you're simply pushing, let's say, taking in an asset and then placing it on the protocol as per the protocol, as per the rules of that protocol, and you're receiving assets based on the fact that those assets are sitting on the protocol, I don't think that falls into the current idea of what the SEC thinks is a regulated product. Now, if you take a bunch of assets and you pool them and then you loan them out and you get a ROI and then you pay an ROI out based on the ROI you receive, obviously somebody could never pay those assets back, or the person or the company, that meaning, the company being the exchange, the platform, could go out of business. And thus, this was a big deal with Coinbase. If you remember, Coinbase had this thing where their terms of service were changed to say, once you, deposit assets with us, they basically become ours because they're on our balance sheet or something. And people got all up in arms about that. But that, and bankruptcy means that, you're not a first creditor because, they're kind of ours. And that's, I think, just a legal statute thing when it comes to bankruptcy in the US. But this is a similar kind of vein here. So if the company were out of business, well, you know, they were loaning out assets. Those become, those become, they have creditors outside the business. Now that needs to be reclaimed, et cetera, et cetera. So I honestly don't think what we're offering falls under the definition or what the SEC is trying to say is be regulated product. The stablecoin thing is not necessarily weird. I think it falls under the same umbrella here. And it might be because of yield. It might simply be how the stablecoin operates in the back end. Are they taking the dollars or whatever euros that they have pooled from clients and then investing them into bonds, treasuries, whatever, and getting a yield? Is it possible that that money can be lost? And if it's lost, what happens to the stablecoin? And I think that's probably the crux of that argument, which is a similar argument, to be honest. Whether or not that argument actually wins in court is going to be interesting to see. Problem is there's only a few guys in the game that have enough money to fight the SEC. And even those that have the money might not want to fight. So we'll have to see. Hi, Kevin. Would you personally recommend to go long on XCM since there are no fees and the price flow will not be changed? I'm not going to make a financial recommendation. What I would say is if you think about risk, there's still risk there because, XCM could cease to exist. Coinmetro could cease to exist. That is the inherent risk or the biggest risk there. When we talk about trading risk, that is, nullified for the most part, I'll say almost entirely, because I guess there could be some type of technical glitch, but I guess that, I would hope that technical glitch would be fixed. And then at the end of the day, there's that risk is gone as well. But your biggest risk is that, Coinmetro doesn't exist anymore. And now that, XCM you bought is valueless. So you can take that and figure out, but I'm not going to make a recommendation. Can't do that. We're talking about regulation here, and I'm not going to step in and make a recommendation. Does CM consider to list UMA? Don't know much about UMA, so you'd have to bring some information to me, and we have a listing committee, so we could take a look. What did you do in Abu Dhabi? Hey, Pete. So in Abu Dhabi, I met with someone who works for a sovereign wealth fund. It's the second or third time I've met with him. We had dinner. We discussed a whole bunch of things, including business, and also just some, other things that have nothing to do with business. And just to, extend the conversation, meet up again, creating a relationship to try and understand if we were to come to Abu Dhabi and go to the ADGM, which is the regulator in Abu Dhabi that regulates crypto and other things, would we be able to have conversations with the sovereign wealth funds? Would they be willing to look at our business? Just had a fruitful discussion, and then got to the airport because my flight leaving Abu Dhabi coming here towards Barcelona was leaving out of Abu Dhabi. I think I said that twice. Kim, hi Kim. When are we going to see changes in tiers? When are we going to see debit cards, IBANs? Their products, and these are products that are interesting for new investors. Nobody's going to come in and drop 6K for a tier one. It's all, look, we've talked about this internally a lot. And there's lots of documentation internally about what we want to do. There's still a little bit of debate about how we should do it, introducing a new tier, adjusting old tiers, doing both of those things. It is in progress. It's kind of sitting in that, business discussion, business decision stage. It's relatively easy to change. And so most of the time here is being spent more on trying to figure out what the best plan of action is versus having to do some type of crazy implementation or changes to the system. When are we going to see debit cards? So debit cards and IBANs, we actually got some information from the provider that we plan to use, which we've, not always, but at least for the past 2 years, we've been working with them. They've been a great partner. They have currently, I believe, probably, it's what it looks like, not that this is written in black and white, but they have an audit that's ongoing, which is stopping them from being able to issue new payment instruments, i.e. cards, until roughly June. Our plan initially was to get new IBANs, same thing, personalized IBANs until roughly June. Might happen in April, but it looks like it might be somewhere between April and June. So we'll say June. And so our initial plan was into Q2 to launch into Q2. So that would be that April timeline to launch the first part of this Challenger Bank service, which would be IBANs. Now we're a little bit at the mercy of this third party. There are other third parties where we can get these services. And And that will be something we look into if we see that in April, that timeline changes, or that timeline changes basically. If it sticks to April to June, we're gonna stick with the same provider, and we're gonna launch those services. If we see in April that it may change, or we have a gut feeling it may change, or we're actually told it's going to change, then we're gonna look for another provider and try to still hit that timeline. To us on the outside, it seems everything went stagnant after the December release. Can you tell us what is being done to address the elephant in the room? Sell wall. Exactly. So we've, in one way, you're right. It's not so much that it went stagnant, because it's still a topic of debate, and there's still things that are happening to get to the point where we can now kind of take the next step. And the next step is all about activating the book, literally. I mean, market making, some type of algorithmic market making, also having an actual, let's almost call it a desk that trades within the XCM book, and then capital basically to fund that operation. And that's all tied to fundraising we're doing right now. So that's why it seems to have stagnated. But there's also a lot of things that need to happen to make sure that once we have that capital, we can deploy it and actually have a functioning market and having a market maker that functions within that market. So, and that stuff is ongoing, and it is, you just don't see it because, well, it happens kind of, under the covers, and then nobody sees what's going on. My question disappeared. I was asking about Biz Dev news. Oh no, Biz Dev. There's actually a fair amount of Biz Dev news. Some of it is with current partners. One of the big things that we want to see happen this year is progress with some form of non-custodial deposits. And I won't give specifics on that right now, but there are two providers or two companies we currently work with that provide a solution for that. And we are in talks with both of them, trying to figure out in which direction we want to head. It will be step one in creating this new hybrid experience on Coinmetro. I think it's super important for the future of centralized exchanges in general. I think I've been talking about hybrid for years now. I don't know the first time I mentioned the word hybrid. Maybe some type of AI can go back through all the AMAs and find it. But I've definitely been talking about it for years. And now, obviously, with what happened at FTX, it's front and center, and I hear other people talking about it. So there's some Biz Dev news around, there's some Biz Dev movement around that. There's also Biz Dev movement around a few other things, whether it be integrations, whether it be kind of B2B services, et cetera. And I've talked about those probably within the last 2 or 3 months, and that continues. And we now have someone actually working on Biz Dev. So our guy Tom is actively on the Biz Dev front. A lot of Biz Dev right now is also tied to fundraising, because that's obviously something we need to do to make sure that those ambitions, whatever they are, Biz Dev or otherwise, can be met. All right, so we got that one. Hi, rumor said that Binance will be fined $1 to $2 billion by the SEC, and they won't prosecute anyone. Any insight on this? Haven't heard those rumors. Depends. I mean, maybe, I don't know. It depends. That's a big fine, which means the underlying, whatever they're saying they would have done for that fine would be quite egregious. Question is then, what do they assume they did? If they think there's some type of, FTX situation, they don't want to be paid with client money. That's for sure. So it really depends. I have no idea. I haven't heard that rumor actually at all. And just because, if you're fined $2 billion and you're not too big to fail, and while in crypto, you may consider Binance too big to fail, meaning too big to fail based on the size of the crypto market and the size of Binance. In the world of finance, Binance is not too big to fail. And so getting one fine, I don't think would stop, whether it be the U.S., other organizations in the U.S., depending again how egregious that potential charge is. But I haven't seen that. After dropping from 7 to 3.5% APR silently, and then a week later announcing a further drop 2.1 APR on Flux, are you going to suspend the early exit penalties? For us here, it didn't drop because of us. And running those nodes still costs the same amount that it cost before. And the program before was, for some months, not profitable for us as a business. And after we tweaked it a little bit, tweaked the kind of technology side, et cetera, tried to get the cost as tight as we could, it became very, very slightly positive in terms of an APR. And so we did that because, well, if you're a Flux holder, you probably knew the halving was coming. You probably understood, at least to a certain extent, that was going to do something to the APR. I don't see how that necessarily changes our own terms of service in terms of how we operate those programs. What I can tell you is that I was part of a discussion about this specifically, and there probably will be some news coming on Flux that will probably be positive, I think, to all Flux holders. And it will be coming. I hate to say the word soon, but it's coming soon. But it doesn't have to do with exit penalties. Don't listen to Pete. He's taking my question. Yeah, no worry. We all know it's jet fuel. That we all know it's you guys. Don't worry about it. Any thoughts on the first mover advantage, Kevin? Just in general, like the first mover advantage, this idea that if you do something first, you have an advantage. Yeah, sometimes if you do something first, you have an advantage. Sometimes you don't. I don't have any stats to show whether whether that first mover advantage is usual, meaning, the high probability that if you move first, you have an advantage. You can definitely move too soon. Being too soon is just as bad as being too late. And so there's lots of first movers that you've never heard of because they moved first. They were too early. They failed. Somebody else came in, and you assume that they're the one that started everything, whether that be for a product, a service, a business, whatever, in general. So first mover to me, might be important. It might not. I think it's one of those things where if you're always concentrating on, we have to be first, you may be missing the big picture, right? That creates a bit of tunnel vision, which probably means you're missing out on a whole bunch of stuff, in your periphery that you're not seeing. Hi, Kevin. How's fundraising doing? And do you see the need to change expectations for the outcome? Lots and lots of talk when it comes to fundraising. In Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, over video calls, in almost every continent, I think. I don't know if I've talked about specifically, but Asia, Europe, South America, North America. Africa is a good question. I think I actually may have talked to someone, maybe not based in, but definitely that works in the continent of Africa. So there's lots of conversations going on. Look, this is a numbers game at the end of the day. The way you raise money is you talk to lots of people. You might get lucky, you talk to 10 people, and that's enough. You may not be lucky, and you have to talk to 1,000. You may get really unlucky, and you have to talk to 10,000. The question is, how long does it take you to talk to those 100 or 10,000 or 100,000 people or whatever it is? And that's it. It's a race and a numbers game. At this point, expectations, no, I don't think they need to be changed, good or bad. Definitely had some really good conversations, and also had conversations that ended before I thought they would. But that's the game. That is the game. That's how you raise money. Some people will love what you're doing. Some people won't. Some people will understand what you're doing. Some people won't. Some people get your narrative and fall right in line with it and say, this is the company that I want to tie my boat to, and others won't. Simple as that. And if you need to be able to take a no, because there's always going to be more no's than yeses. Well, that's just business in general, I guess. Are you going to have more 2x APR events in XCM to get the wall down? It chopped a good 100K off last time. I wouldn't rule it out, but as far as I know, there's nothing in the planning phases, as I'm talking here. So, but I wouldn't rule it out. Is there any news, I guess, from your business trip to the UAE you can share with us? Lots of conversations, some ongoing, some in, various stages of completion. Also getting closer to finally finalizing our application with VARA. It's been submitted. We got a few documents that we got to figure out, but generally speaking, we're pretty close, which is good. And ADGM, I've had initial conversations with them. Unfortunately, on this trip, with so much going on in Dubai, I didn't have enough time to get to Abu Dhabi the days that I wanted to schedule more meetings there. But I will be back for an event on the 27th and 28th. I'm going to fly in a few days early, and I will go and have those conversations with ADGM. Which could also lead to funding as well. It's not just about a regulatory conversation. Hey, Kevin. Hey, Deep Philippe, how are you? Good to see marketing efforts paying off. Was wondering if you could give us any insight into the current runway, and are you doing any fundraising? Currently fundraising, yeah, we're raising 25 million euro. That has just recently started, and we're still tweaking here and there, documentation, etc. So we're relatively early into the round. And as far as current runway goes, it's a bit dynamic because as this business grows, we need stagnant capital in a lot of places to make sure that the business is optimized. What does that mean? Well, imagine that, withdrawals, deposits, all these things always need capital, right? They always need capital sitting there, but we also need capital sometimes at liquidity providers. We also have capital that's deployed to many different places, whether that be merchant accounts, different payment service providers that we use, et cetera, et cetera. And all that means that we need X amount of capital. Usually it's roughly a percentage of kind of the amount of capital that we hold for clients needs to be just somewhere at all times. And so the bigger we grow, the more capital we need. So even though there's money, sometimes it's hard to get access to that money, at least immediately. Doesn't mean you can't get access to it. We obviously can, but it doesn't happen like this. It takes us slightly longer than that. And so the runway, I think we're floating, we're in months of runway, months. Access to that may mean today it looks like less months, and tomorrow it looks like more months, simply because of how that ebb and flow works with cash flow. But we have months, and we have already brought in some money on fundraising. So that's ongoing, and we've brought in, let's say, more money than we would have needed during the time we raised it. So our burn, even though our burn rate hasn't affected our runway, and that's definitely going to start to pick up as we start to have more conversations. Smash the like button. Yep, thanks guys, appreciate it. Any update on reviving the XCM book with more liquidity? I think I've already touched on that one, so I'll move on. You also mentioned that there could be exciting news coming out of UAE, which we'd share on the next AMA. Still not ready to spill some beans, but there's always exciting news out of the UAE, to be honest. Every time I go there, it surprises me at kind of the amount of movement that happens. I'm not there for a month or 2 or 3, and I go back, and so much has happened on so many different fronts. That includes just Dubai itself. There was no building, now there's a building. This was here, now something else is here. This rule, which they were trying to put that in place, and it's already done, and it's functioning, etc. So there's always exciting news out of Dubai. UAE in general. Hi, sorry, I missed out on the selection. Can my Ignium share still transfer? Yeah, this one, I think this is a support query. So I guess the answer is, technically speaking, yes. But I believe you're already in touch with someone, because I got some private messages from you. So I'm not going to answer that one publicly, because, well, it's more of a private question. Anyway, any new material passive income opportunities coming for XCM holders? I appreciate the 4% of my stake XCM. The Mars percents are so small right now, it doesn't add up to much. Well, the Mars percents are small because the amount of income derived from those assets is small, because, well, we need people to stake in order for those to go higher. So I still think Mars is an amazing product, and I still think it's going to bring a lot of value to XCM holders, but it's about bringing on new users. And when new users come in, they make use of those services, and Mars expands. We will constantly be looking to add passive income opportunities into Mars and just on the platform in general. That's not going to change. What are you most excited about for 2023 in regards to Coinmetro and XCM? I think 2023 is going to be a pretty formative year for not only the business, but also the industry in general. So I think a lot of people, a lot of businesses, CM included, are going to try to come back to fundamentals, really start to focus on how to position yourself, whether it be through tweaking of products, tweaking of narrative, tweaking of whatever, adding in different things that all build a better foundation for the next bull run, right? For the next time that a mass amount of new users roll into this industry. And we're probably not that far away from that. Now, I don't mean not that far away in crypto terms. I'm not saying it's going to happen next week, but 2023, it could be 2024, even if it's 2025, relatively speaking. And I don't think it's 2025. Everybody needs to refocus on fundamentals. They need to bring back trust to the market. They need to figure out how they instill trust in their users. We need to figure out how we can do that through technology. That's not just a load of bullshit. And all those things I think are exciting. This hybrid idea is exciting. Finally bringing challenger banking services is exciting. But I think this core, let's get to fundamentals and let's make this machine work, even if it has no oil, is kind of that I think is the most exciting thing. And, when it comes to XCM, I think everything exciting that happens to Coinmetro is exciting for XCM and vice versa. You can separate the two, but at the end of the day, XCM is a reflection of Coinmetro, and Coinmetro is literally a reflection of that product, because I think it's one of the most important, if not the most important product we offer. When XCM buyback, when Moon, when Lambo? When Moon, I don't know. I guess, space travel is getting cheaper. So I guess when you moon, you can go to the moon if you have enough capital. I don't know what your portfolio looks like, but when you buy one, I guess. Plus, I think it's WEN, not WHEN. I think it's a flaw there. I don't even know if I should be answering the question if it's not stated correctly. XCM buyback, we do XCM buybacks all the time. I mean, they happen every time there's a transaction on the spot exchange. So, one probably happened in the time that I just, kind of mentioned it now. So ongoing. Hi, Kevin. How are you today? Hey, Philip. What would happen if XCM never gets liquidity again? Would that be tantamount to Coinmetro going bankrupt? And would Coinmetro still be able to pay out its XCM holders? I'll start at the end there. Coinmetro still be able to pay out its XCM holders. XCM is not a stable coin. It's not like there's capital sitting in a bank account that backs XCM. XCM is simply a utility token that has a price. So the latter, one, if Coinmetro were to go bankrupt, obviously, even if there were reserves, there may not, those reserves, there'd be an audit, there'd be this, the company would get liquidated. Whether or not it'd be one-to-one would come down to the audit and the liquidation. If Coinmetro were to go bankrupt, XCM is probably going to lose value, obviously, because if the floor is no longer going to be present, and XCM will be traded on some third party like Uniswap or whatever. And the value, because the value is intrinsically tied to the business, would go lower. That's for sure. XCM never getting liquidity, I think what that would mean is Coinmetro doesn't exist. I think that's the answer to your question. If Coinmetro exists at some point in the future, XCM will be liquid. If Coinmetro doesn't exist, it won't. And I think that's it. It's kind of a yin yang. It either will be, or the only reason it wouldn't be at some point in the future is because the company's not here anymore. Once you mentioned Coinmetro has a little debt, what the counterparty and how significant is it? In the past, I'm trying to think when I mentioned this. Right now, we have a bit of debt that's tied to the acquisition of Ignium. A couple to a few €100,000 that will be liquidated end of April. That's the schedule. And we have a bit of debt that we took on from some investors. All in all, it is currently somewhere in the realm. It's high six figures. So not that significant. And it relatively, this is a relatively new thing. I can't remember in the past of us holding debt, but I'd have to think about that one. When CM debit card, I already referenced that one at the beginning of the show, so you can rewind and find it. Any news about XCM going above? Well, I've already kind of answered that as well. Maybe not that exact question, but I definitely answered that question. Third-party IBAN and debit card provider. I thought you will go through digital fiat for this. Well, digital fiat has a provider. I guess that. So you're right, but obviously underneath digital fiat isn't issuing MasterCards itself or Visas, or it's not issuing IBANs. It's still using an underlying third party, and that's always the case with these type of products. Coinmetro is not yet self-sustainable. That would mean that our burn rate was zero, right? That we were not burning money. We are burning money, so not yet self-sustainable. Do you think the majority will accept programmable CBDC? Will the crypto be a lifeline? Well, look, most payments now are digital anyway. If you have a credit card, a debit card, if you make a SEPA transfer to one bank to another, if you make an ACH transfer in the US, or if you move money between banks, all that is already, to a certain extent, programmable. It's already electronic and it's already traceable, and and that traceability is, almost identical to what you'd have with a CBDC. I don't really see why there's such an uproar about CBDC unless your assumption is that all cash will go away and CBDCs will not allow for any privacy with any amount of transaction value. I've seen papers written by central banks, also written by advisors to central banks, and most of them talk about privacy up to a certain amount of transaction value. Meaning that just like with cash, if you have $100 or €100 or £100 or even 1,000, and you buy something with it, you don't have to provide identification. But if you go into a car dealer to buy a car and you plop down cash, you're going to fill out some forms. And the same thing goes if you go to buy a house for cash. There are limitations. I don't see why those limitations just wouldn't carry over to CBDCs, meaning that the difference between programmable digital cash and regular cash, at least when it comes to a privacy standpoint, would generally stay the same. Do I know that's going to happen? No, but I don't see why right now I wouldn't make the assumption it won't. Will crypto be a lifeline? I don't really know how to answer that question because I don't understand the question. It's not going to change anything. I mean, fundamentally speaking, cash is cash, whether it's digital cash or not. The whole question for me, I think for most people, is all about traceability and whether or not this is some type of 1984 thing where they're just trying to, create like an Jesus, I can't say the word. Sorry, it's been a long day. We're trying to move kind of down the path of China. Authoritarianism, Jesus. Anyway, I'll type it out for you guys because I can't say it for some reason. The point is that I think that's a major assumption, and there might be variants of truth in that, but I don't know why that is. I don't know why you would assume that it's truth. Could be, but there's no reason right now to assume. I think, CBDCs as well, you got to understand a central bank issued digital currency is going to be used to clear between central banks and commercial banks. Whether or not that CBDC will be offered by the commercial bank out to the public is a major question. Maybe we're just going to have, Bank of America dollars and UBS euros. And underneath that will be a CBDC, how they clear back and forth with the central bank. The central bank's not going to open wallets for individuals. They've never done that in the past. Why would they do that now? That's what commercial banks are for. So there's a lot of questions I think that people don't answer or don't know enough to ask, or they just simply don't understand, which leads to confusion on exactly what a CBDC is and how it's going to work. Yeah. Well, I don't buy into that. I think I think if you don't understand how central banks, commercial banks work, they don't really understand right now how money works. M1 money, M2 money, M3 money, M4 money, M5 money, all those different types of money, how they're already digital, traceable for the most part. I literally had a guy, and I think I posted this on Twitter. I was standing in an airport. Dude was buying an airline ticket on his American Express card, complaining about how CBDCs were, basically 1984. And obviously he's making a traceable payment using a payment instrument that tracks every payment he makes. I don't understand why that argument's being made. It just doesn't make sense, honestly speaking. Any update on ETH staking? Not for me, not today. No update on ETH staking. Hasn't been much progress down that path, though. Well, there's been some progress down the staking path for specific assets, and I have seen some discussions around ETH. There's been some movement between some of our underlying custody providers to make sure that we can roll out new staking programs. That's for sure. Would you say the current situation is a bull trap? No, I think we're just in a range. People get excited when we get to the top of a range, but it's still a range. It's a relatively big range, but no, I wouldn't necessarily call it a bull trap. If we break that range to the upside, sustain that, and then we start to see kind of distribution, then yeah, maybe. But I haven't really seen that yet. We're just sitting in a range. When can Coinmetro be sustainable? Well, that's a bit of a loaded question. It could be tomorrow. It could be in a year. It could be in 2 or 3 years. According to our projections, 2024, end of 2024, Coinmetro potentially will be sustainable. 2025, well, actually profitable by the end of 2024. But let's say on average across 2024, sustainable, and then into 2025, profitable. What about the shareholders from Ignium? How does it work? Because Coinmetro is now 70% ownership. We have more than 70% ownership. In fact, we will end up with very, very close to 100% ownership. Right now, what that means, shareholders have had a choice either to swap into Coinmetro equity, take some cash, or if they don't respond, they'll just retain their Ignium shares, as Ignium is still going to remain a company just owned almost entirely by Coinmetro Group. Thanks, Crypto Junkie. Appreciate that. All right, guys. I was planning on 30 minutes. I'm at 39. I'm going to cut it there. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for watching me here from Barcelona. I'm probably going to have to go back to the event now and answer some questions and walk around and smile and drink some water and maybe an espresso here or there. So thank you so much for all the questions. They were amazing. Thanks, London, for that great intro of 7 questions. Those were also great. They probably answered a lot of other people's questions, so I appreciate that. Have a great Thursday, everybody. Have a great Friday going into the weekend. Have a great weekend. If you can't spend time with friends and family physically, which you should be able to do at this point, I think, make sure you do it virtually. And I always tell your family that XCM is the cure for everything, because we all know it is. And hopefully, wink, 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 Gary Gensler. That's it. That's all I got. Have a great one, guys. Cheers. Thanks for all the support as per usual.